Today we're going to be talking about how I manage my finances as a student in London. So being a student, you're going to find yourself strapped for cash a lot of the time, especially if you live in a big city such as London. So taking into account as well the cost of living crisis at the moment, I thought it'd be useful if I shared some tips and tricks that I use to get by to manage my finances in London as a student. So my first tip and something I really like to do is budgeting. I see how much money I get from student finance, and this will be the case for a lot of students. Take that money and then divide that maybe on a monthly or weekly basis, so you know roughly how much financially you can sort of operate within and the framework that you can operate within. For example, what I like to do is I get my student finance money and I like to divide that by a monthly basis. And then what you can do is you can take away stuff that you have to pay for example, such as rent and like a grocery shop, for example. And then you know exactly how much money you have per that set period of time. So it makes it a lot more manageable to track your finances and how much you're spending. And if you really want to, you can even do this on a daily basis. So you can see specifically, okay, I've got £20 I can spend today, for example. Have I gone over that? Have I not? And you can be conscious of that when you're going out socializing, for example. I didn't make a budget in the first term of university. I was just sort of spending money without really setting myself any parameters. You do have to be somewhat disciplined and have a level of sort of discipline attached to your finances, especially as a student, right? But yeah, budgeting was something I found extremely useful and something I recommend every student does. So my second tip, and something I stress a lot of people to do, especially students, of course, is by nature of just studying, you can actually be eligible for so many offers that often a lot of students aren't even aware of. Many banks, what they do is, as like an incentive for you to bank with them, is when you open a student bank account with them, you often get a freebie or like quite a few incentives attached for creating that bank account. I actually opened quite a few bank accounts before I went to university, all the student offers. It doesn't affect your credit rating in any way. So I opened a bank with HSBC, for example, and they offered £100 for free, no strings attached, just for opening and banking with them on a student bank account. Another bank account, Santander, they offered a free 4-year rail card, which can save you a third of travel across the UK on trains. So I definitely recommend looking into banking and specifically the student banking offers, because you can make a lot of money and claim a lot of freebies just by like filling out a quick form to fill out a bank account, such as your name and address, for example. These freebies and my rail card, for example, I use that all the time if I'm commuting back home from university in London. And it saves me a lot of money in the process. Just building upon this as well, by nature of being a student, obviously you go to university, check what scholarships and grants and bursaries as well your university offers. My university, UCL, for example, is very generous with me. I get a student low income bursary, so I get over £1,000 in the course of an academic year, which it makes a great difference in terms of just how much disposable income I have to socialize, or if I want to, with my grocery shop, put that money towards that, for example, or even my rent across a year, right? So definitely recommend checking out what your university offers. Obviously, eligibility does vary and it will undoubtedly change between universities, but a lot of them do offer very good or very generous bursaries or scholarship schemes. So definitely look into that and inquire about them if they're not even advertised, because you never know, they may have a high achieving scholarship, for example, that you can claim some free income. I don't have to pay my bursary back, and a lot of them you don't unless there are some strings attached, so do definitely check that. But it's a great way of gaining yourself some extra cash and making it that little bit easier to manage your finances while you are a student, especially if you are in a big city such as London. Now, one final thing I'd like to mention is student discounts, right? So when you are consuming or when you are spending money, you can save money in this process of spending money, right? A bit of a sort of catch-22 there. But in the sense that a lot of high street shops or cafes and restaurants, most of them offer a student discount. It will never really exceed about 20%, but even if you're getting 10%, for example, and you're getting 10% off all your spending over like an academic year of 9 months, for example, it really adds up and you can save some money. So definitely do check that. There are some great websites online such as Uni Days or Grad Days or Student Beans. That's another one that I frequently sort of look at to see if there's any student discounts or specific ones in a time frame, for example. So definitely be conscious of that when you are spending, and don't be afraid to ask. A lot of the time, sort of restaurants, cafes, bars, whatever, they won't always advertise overtly that they offer student discounts, but most of the time they do if you do ask. So don't be afraid to ask, and definitely check that out so you can save yourself a bit of money when you are spending. Another aspect of sort of managing your finances and saving a bit of cash that I think is very useful actually is sort of taking advantage of where you live, or by virtue of being a student, where you find yourself, right? So I'm very lucky. I live in London, so I have countless free events and opportunities, or even just things to do really, even that are like slightly touristy, for example. So definitely take advantage of that. I love to sort of go just for long walks, for example, whether it's in Regent's Park or Richmond Park. There's plenty of sort of free tourist activities you can do, no doubt, in your city or where you find yourself being a student. So definitely do consider this. I always think if you are spending, but like in your free time, you're not necessarily spending via activities and sort of your leisurely time, it's a great way of saving money, because you strip down your finances and your outgoings just to sort of more essential sort of parts of life, right? Like food and rent and, you know, like having a roof over your head. So yeah, if you sort of consider your leisurely activities and stuff, and take advantage where you are, and sort of free offerings, there's loads of free events if you do look close enough. Definitely do consider this. It's not going to save you loads of money, don't get me wrong, like, you know, it's not going to cover your rent, for example, the savings, but even if it's £5-10 a week, it adds up. It all adds up, right? So definitely do consider that, and yeah, take advantage of where you live. And finally, and maybe a slightly obvious one actually, is getting a job, right? Do consider a part-time job. A full-time job would be no easy feat managing with university, let alone a part-time job, to be honest. I always recommend to people 0-hour type contracts, or employment that sort of finds itself in the gig economy. Although it's quite precarious with sort of the contracts and sort of any job security, it's quite limited really. As a student, they can often play to your tune and your advantage. So definitely do consider that. The work's always quite flexible as well, which is sort of quite necessary when you've got lots of deadlines to reach, for example, and you've got a lot going on with your studies alone, right? And another sort of part of getting a job that's, I think, quite underrated is actually getting a job with your university specifically. Your university by nature, of course, is going to be quite understanding with you and your studies, because obviously you go there. So you just need to find a job with a level of flexibility, and a university can provide that quite a lot as well. And sort of on top of that as well, universities are always fairly decent in terms of their pay sort of package, right? I think a lot of universities, because they like to see themselves as progressive institutions, they're often going to give you a somewhat reasonable wage, and it's not usually going to be bare minimum. Maybe that's optimistic thinking, but definitely do consider getting employment, often part-time, maybe with your university, but make sure it's flexible and fits around your studies. So yeah, that's been all from me today. I hope you found it useful, some of these tips and tricks, and how I like to sort of manage my finances and keep on top of them as a student in London. And I hope to see you on the next video.